All right. Well, I think it's time we should get started. So, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for attending Block Club Chicago's Pride Month panel. My name is Jake Whittick. I cover Lakeview, Lincoln Park, and Old Town with a sprinkle of LGBTQ news, which is what we're doing here tonight. So for those of you not familiar with Block Club, we are a nonprofit reader-funded newsroom that's reflective and responsive to the neighborhood's newsrooms. So our reporters are really embedded in the communities that we cover, and we don't parachute in once or twice a year when there's a big story. We're in there every single day. And this ground level approach really leads to more accurate coverage of our neighborhoods and builds trust with our readers. Another thing we like to do at Block Club is engage with our communities, which is what we're here to do tonight. So tonight we're here to celebrate Pride Month, and we're going to do that with a discussion with these drag performers. And we're going to talk about how we can build inclusive spaces for all LGBTQ people. Much of this discussion will revolve around inclusivity within Chicago's queer community, but this conversation should be valuable to allies looking to make their spaces welcoming as well. So now I'd like to introduce our panelists. First, we have Abhijeet. She is a drag performer and events performer who organizes inclusive parties for a queer pride. Abhi has years of experience creating welcoming spaces for the entire LGBTQ community and produces the monthly party Boots, as well as the dim sum and drag brunch at Farama. Next is Joe MaMa. They are a drag queen, photographer, bartender, and activist who co-founded the Chicago Black Drag Council, which is an organization that's advocating for racial justice and inclusivity within Chicago's nightlife scene. And then lastly, we have Milani Varela, who is a gender nonconforming drag queen activist and former mother of the House of Ninja. Milani is the reigning Diosa Latina Illinois and getting ready for the national pageant right now, so wish her luck. And she's the ambassador of the CDC's Let's Stop HIV Together campaign. So in the spirit of Pride Month, I want to kick it off by first asking our panelists what Pride means to them and what topics or issues are top of mind for them as we celebrate Pride. So Abhijeet, I'll let you start off and take it away.
Yeah, I think because as someone who works with the queer community year round, Pride is the moment in time where we get to have our heightened emotions. We get to really take everything we do year round and take it to the next level. So for me, Pride is about being the most, being a lot, and occupying way too much space.
Definitely. How about you, Joe?
Thank you, Jake. Hey, everybody. Pride to me is definitely a point of celebration and reflection. And for me, I always take that either further to bring back our roots. And Pride to me is a big part of protest. It's kind of like a big part of my thing every time it rolls around every year. I think about how to raise our collective voices in solidarity to kind of, call attention to some things and make sure we don't lose the soul of Pride.
Thank you. And then Milani?
Yes, for me, Pride obviously is not just about being proud of being who you are, how you present, and celebrating our Pride. It's also about remembering our trailblazers like Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera and all those other trans and gender nonconforming and drag queens who started the riots. We have to make sure we remember that a lot of these kids don't know about why we're celebrating Pride, and it's also a chance for us to remind them, to teach them that it's also about celebrating those who came before us, which is the reason why we have Pride.
Yeah, definitely. And to add, the reason we celebrate Pride in June is it's the anniversary of the 1969 Stonewall riots, which is largely regarded as a turning point in the gay liberation movement. And the uprisings, which lasted several days, are believed to have been started by Black trans women. So it's really important that as we continue to celebrate Pride, we don't lose sight of that, and we make sure that we're still including people of color, people of all genders in our Pride and in our activism. So I guess next, this question goes out to everyone. We'll do it in the same order. So Abhijeet, I'll let you answer first, but do you want to tell me a little bit more about you and the work you do, and then how you work inclusivity into that?
Definitely. So for people who aren't familiar with me, my name is Abhijeet. Like Jake said, I am a drag performer and an event producer in Chicago. I actually moved to Chicago in 2012 for school, and it quickly became my home. I really found my family, my community here, and it's been such an important part of shaping who I am as a person. And in that time here, in finding my community, I came across Chicago and nightlife and the Chicago drag scene, and I really found this very intense bond with the people around me, coming to terms with my gender identity, coming to terms with my sexuality, things that I had not really gotten the opportunity to explore when I was living in India. And so I am very protective of this community. I'm very loyal to this community. And in the events that I produce and the performance spaces that I occupy, I always like to make sure that people who want to be there find a way to be there. Something like accessibility comes in like a lot of different forms, from like accessibility for people with like physical needs to accessibility for people with financial needs. And I feel like it's our role as kind of like figureheads in the scene to try and find like ways we can like get people who are facing certain barriers into a space. So for me personally, like it's about trying to find like ways to make cover and like cover accessible, to try and find as many like free spaces for people, to find ways in which like people don't feel like their identity is at stake when entering. So it's like definitely an ongoing conversation and an ongoing like thing that we're going through and trying to find the right solution to. But for me, it's always about like asking questions when you walk into a space and trying to find out like how to make it as accessible to everyone.
Definitely, yeah. And Joe Mama, would you like to give us a little bit of your background and how you work inclusivity into that?
Thank you. Yeah. Also, mirroring everything Abhijeet said, and watching them grow and develop and really create some inclusive spaces, especially in events. Hopefully, I have been able to do that as well. I work with the geek community and do a lot of cosplay stuff, and we've always fought to make sure that with casting, that it's not only Black and brown bodies, but trans bodies, every handy capability possible. And with a lot of the protests and the marches I do, one of the biggest things is access. Whether that be making sure your route isn't too long or too bumpy, making sure there's interpreters, not just for ASL, but also for multiple languages, making sure that it's safe, making sure that we even had mental health experts on site, just in case something was to get another access needs to arise. And bringing those same levels of safety and access into everything I do, whether it be an event or a town hall or things of that nature. I work a lot with the Black Drag Council directly with ownership of a lot of venues. And we like to revisit things and check in on certain boundaries and parameters to make sure that it's a safe environment. Because as we all know, safety does not happen on accident. Safety is a result of things we put in place that we reinforce as a community. And as Abhijeet was touching on, it very much is an organic thing that grows and develops and adapts. And I think that I'm trying to do my best to grow with that in all that I do.
Definitely. Thank you, Joe Mama. And Milani, can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you incorporate inclusivity into everything you do?
Yes. So I have been working in HIV prevention for the last 14 years. I'm currently working at Calor. I am the lead navigator for Essential Support Services. Calor is part of AIDS Healthcare Foundation. So the way that we make sure, that we are inclusive is that even though we have certain grants for certain populations, we serve everyone. You know, it doesn't matter your race, your religion, anything. We make sure that we serve everyone. And another way that we are very inclusive is that we are really trying to work with the undocumented population here in Chicago to get them into care, because a lot of them are out of care or just moved into the country. So myself and my coworkers, we make sure that we are able to find some way to get them their HIV medications and proper health treatment. And even with our performers, whenever we have events, like whether virtual or in person or different things, we make sure that they're very inclusive of different performers, which is something we take a lot of pride in. It's something that I love about working at Calor. I'm also part of the ballroom scene. I was mother of the House of Ninja. I'm still part of the ballroom scene. And I've been working a lot with the Black community together. They are actually the ones who include me into making sure that, you know, we're reaching for, like, you know, research studies, that we're making sure that, you know, our youth in the ballroom scene are getting the proper resources that they need. And yeah, that's me.
Cool. Thank you. And Milani, we'll stick with you for this next question, but I also want to open it up to the chat. So if anyone watching would like to chime in, my next question is, what makes you feel comfortable in a space? So when you walk in and you see the room, what kinds of things make you feel safe, included, and welcome?
What makes me feel safe, included, and welcome is just the ambience of the people. If we're talking about bars, I'm talking about like the staff, from security to barbacks to bartenders. There's a different vibe that some people might give. So we have to, like I that's what makes me feel safe, making sure that I feel comfortable when they're checking my ID, when I'm being served, when I'm walking around, and it's that's what makes me feel safe. The comfortability of the employees and even the customers that are there, that they're at a level where I'm comfortable enough to be myself and walk in as Milani, and just that feeling of feeling welcome.
That's really important. Joe Mama, do you have anything you'd like to add? What makes you feel welcome in a space?
For me, is when it comes to feeling welcome, I don't know, it's hard to say. I've really felt unwelcome at some places, and a lot from the exterior, you can kind of tell the vibe, the feel. How's this going to go? Of course, a Groupon will always make me feel welcome because I love a discount. But beyond that, it really is. I think people all need to be recognized and appreciated and validated, and so those steps of service really can be approaching the place and feeling welcome to walk inside. You're not going to be asked for 3 forms of ID. For one, the appreciation of just like a hello, welcome, even these verbal cues or nonverbal cues that are often given through body language. And then the recognition, when even getting a drink or turning in a ticket, that they're like, hi, thank you for coming. Or even the welcome that could come from a host. Things like that really validate and recognize you as a person, to make you feel welcome. Looking around and seeing others like you. I know in a library, I feel really welcome because I'm a big old nerd. And in an arcade, same thing. And those kinds of things can be translated into unwelcome environments to kind of shake them up and make them seem more welcome.
Yeah, definitely. How about you, Abby? What kinds of things make you feel welcome when you enter a space?
Yeah, as like corny as it's gonna sound, it's like really about the vibe, right? Like we have like an intuition when we enter a space to know, like to immediately like be able to read people's body language, read our surroundings, to know like how welcome we actually are there. And I feel like as queer people, a lot of us can attest to it, that like we innately don't feel welcome in most spaces. So we already have like this kind of like protective barrier that we have built. And when we enter new space or even familiar spaces, it's really about like gauging our surroundings. Like I feel like for a lot of people, we are on edge when entering new space, especially if folks are trans or gender non-conforming. So I think like for me, something that makes me immediately feel welcome is if any like front-facing person that I am seeing has like good energy. And I know that's like such a vague answer, but I feel like good energy is something you know when you feel it.
Yeah, definitely. And a common thread I heard in all of your responses is representation. It sounds like you're saying when you walk into a room and you see people who look like you or share similar identities or experiences to you, it makes you feel safer. Joe Mama, I know that the Chicago Black Drag Council, which formed in 2020 after organizing the Drag March for Change protest, which for those of you who aren't aware, that drew thousands to the Boys Town, North Halsted neighborhood shortly after the murder of George Floyd, to demand for racial justice and also inclusivity within Chicago's own LGBTQ community. So Joe Mama, I was wondering if you could tell me a little bit about why the Drag Council was created and what kinds of work it's done.
Just something to do, some way to get through quarantine. No, as you said, it was definitely formed as part of the reckoning that Chicago and the world really went through in 2020 in response to the murder of George Floyd. One of the big things with the original Drag March for Change and all these drag queens coming together and testifying was to lead by example and clean up our community first. I know there was that SNL skit, must get rid of toxic in the community, but one of the goals was to, not just make a mess, but leave it better than we found it. So through specific initiatives, like we did a Valentines thing for seniors who were very much sequestered in a time where they would feel unloved. We've done things like making sure that we could disseminate funds out to those in needs for like a mutual aid through financial help. We did that. There's quite a few other incentives. There's more incentives on the horizon. We're doing to not only like insulate and protect the community, but also empower it. There's one initiative specifically about a way to allow for, let's say a person has an idea for an event. So, but they have no idea where to start. They then could come to the council and the council would be like, well, let's talk you through how to write a proposal, how to cast something in a diverse way that's fair and equitable to all. Let's introduce you to other show producers who could be mentors, mentorees. Let's tell you which venues that you could probably pitch this at and get it. And then also provide a financial boost. So that way it's more incentivized for the venue itself, because that way it's almost no cost to them to say yes to it. And then after that, the event would kind of be on its own. But those kinds of things to break down barriers that the council can do to help ensure the safety and progress for a better future. So that's kind of giving you a window of what all we do.
Yeah, one thing I remember the Black Drag Council doing was creating the Chicago Black Drag Valentine Cabaret, which, do you want to tell me a little bit about that first, and then I'll ask you my question?
Sure. The Black Valentine Cabaret, presented by the Chicago Black Drag Council, is bringing together a whole group of Black performers across the spectrum to just join together and bring out some Black joy. I talk about radical joy a lot, finding joy in dark times. And especially during quarantine, and now as we move beyond it, it's important to remind people just how much talent like Black bodies can bring to the table, and brown bodies, and just how valid that is. And it's easy to be forgotten. And this kind of helps course correct that and provide some access for people in need who may have been overshadowed or lost somewhere in the fray to step to the front and really show out and show up.
Yeah, in my reporting, I've seen the Black Drag Council do a lot to create opportunities for Black entertainers by holding bars accountable to make sure that their cast lists are diverse, and doing things like the Black Valentine Cabaret, where it's an all Black cast to give people opportunities. How does diversifying cast lists trickle down and make those spaces safer for attendees and non-performers?
Well, I think we all touched on earlier with the representation. When you can look on a stage or look at a poster and see a face that's like you, it opens the door and you feel welcome, and you're going to be more likely to show up. So then when they show up, we've now diversified the populace that comes to the show, which is now diverse in the clientele, more likely there to come there on other days outside the show. And it really grows that diversity throughout. So it really is a real, I'm not a fan of trickle-down economics, but I am a fan of trickle-down casting.
Yeah, definitely. And then turning to Abhijeet, you produce a lot of shows and parties through Queer Pride, so I'm interested to hear your thoughts on this as well. What goes into making these events, and what steps do you take to make them inclusive?
Yeah, so I think like when I was starting out in Chicago drag, like, we were all talking about earlier, like there was such little like visual representation, such few spaces where we were actually made to feel like welcome as like brown, as Black, as trans and gender non-conforming people, that like when I started to get into producing something, the biggest question to me was like, how can I make people who feel and look and are like me feel welcome in a space? And a Queer Pride was kind of born out of that, with just like a collective of friends who had like a similar like outlook on like how we wanted to like produce meaningful spaces that are fun, because I think that like there are a lot of like accomplished activists that are creating spaces for community and that are creating spaces for like growth and building and support. And those personally aren't my strengths. So I wanted to see like how I can intersect my strength of like creating like an event or a party and make it something that is like accessible and diverse. And I think like the biggest tool for me in like growing as like a producer and a performer is being open to feedback and being open to the idea and possibility that you're wrong and you've messed up sometimes. And I think like comparing to what the kind of events I was doing when I was starting out to what I'm doing now, I can see like this very drastic like growth and change in like what I've done. So like for instance, I have a show called Dim Sum and Drag, which is Chicago's only all Asian drag show, like Chicago's only pan-Asian drag show. And it happens once a month at Furama, which is a dim sum restaurant uptown. And that just turned into like this culmination of so many different things, because like as I was booking performers and talking to them, we noticed how like more often than not, there's hardly one, if any, like Asian person in a drag show. It's very rare to see two of us together. The fact that there are like two Asian drag kings in the same show, I don't like, you know, like these are just like things that come up, and it turned into this very sort of like community, like our like mini community and family. Because like something that I like to tie in is like after we perform, we sit down and eat food together when everyone leaves, and it's like such like a nice like endearing moment for people to just kind of like unwind with the people that they just spent this like very intense like heightened like hour of performing and energy with. And it's really nice to be able to do that. But even that, like, you know, it got so much support, and we're really lucky to be like sold out and supported every month, that like I realized that like if we're getting this kind of support, how does it benefit the people outside of this group? So we kind of like built in a new payment structure where like all our performers get a bonus based on like how many tickets we sell. So there's like, you know, they have their booking fee, which is pretty standard for like any brunch show. And we almost double that booking fee because of the bonuses that we give out. And then in addition to that, we make a donation of between $500 to $750 each month that goes in direct support to people who aren't able to access spaces due to either being disabled or immunocompromised and are restricted from these spaces because of COVID. So like it turned into this thing of like what can we do to support those that don't have support right now? And even that idea of giving mutual aid and financial support, that didn't come out of nowhere. That came out of a letter that was written by disabled and immunocompromised activists in Chicago, urging community leaders to find ways to support the disabled community in this time. And it was a direct conversation that I had with one of the writers that led to like, what are steps that I can take since I have an event that collects a large number of people that are giving money? How can I find ways to redistribute that money and support people who aren't able to get that support? So it's really nice to be able to like do that. And that's something that like, not just me, but like my entire collective of Queer Pride is very invested in, is finding ways to like redistribute.
That's really great. You brought up that letter, which was released a few months ago by a group of queer disabled people who were kind of calling on Chicago's queer nightlife scene to make their spaces more accessible. The city was really reopening while it was shortly after the Omicron spike, and COVID is still very real and very out here in Chicago. And a lot of people were feeling like, because of that, they weren't included in these spaces. So I've seen a lot of nightlife producers take steps to include those people in their programming. For example, Lukami live streams all of his shows, which I think is one way you can do it. And you just touched on another. So thank you for bringing that up. My next question is for Milani. I covered an event last year in which you spoke about how our gay bars weren't accepting certain types of IDs, which was affecting queer immigrants. Can you talk a little bit more about that issue and other ways in which not just bars, but every space can be more welcoming to our immigrant community?
Yes. Basically, as far as bars, I feel that they need to all go through a training, just how like security is trained on, you know, Illinois state IDs and driver licenses to make sure if they're fake or not. We also have to make sure that we check that the matriculas from the Consulado Mexicano or other consulates like the Guatemalan or Honduran consulate, you know, like we have to make sure that we know that these are valid in the state of Illinois. Like even some people still don't, some places don't take these IDs because they're like, oh, you know, it's not a state ID. So we need to make sure that not only the bars, but other places all around Chicago need to have some type of training where it shows, okay, these are the IDs that are not from Illinois, but that are still given here in Illinois, in Chicago itself, that are acceptable, you know, to enter a place or to buy alcohol, or, you know, just to, you know, feel welcome. You know, when undocumented people arrive to this country, like a lot of them obviously don't have some type of IDs, so we have to take into consideration that, you know, their passports are valid. You know, we have to make sure that we understand, and also make sure that we clock which ones are fake and which ones are not. Um, but as far as like the undocumented community, I feel that, um, like, another thing is, like, a lot of these bars, well, all of the bars ask for a W-9 form. When, like, if you're a performer, let's say if you're a performer, you're undocumented, and you need to fill out this W-9 form. Um, a lot of performers are scared because they don't have a social security number to put down into this W-9 form. So what is it that the bars are doing? What is it that these places are doing that, you know, I understand that they need the W-9 form, but there has to be some loophole there where we get to find a way to make sure that we include undocumented performers into our shows as well.
Now, next, shifting gears a little bit, the North Hallstetter Boys Town neighborhood has been undergoing a sort of a reckoning these past few years. There's been decades of racism, transphobia, and other discriminatory incidents within the neighborhood, but some recent events include Progress Bar attempting to ban rap music, and Beatnik selling a Confederate flag vest in 2019, among some other things. So I was wondering if you all could chime in with what are some of the direct or indirect methods of discrimination you've witnessed, not just in Boys Town, but within the larger LGBTQ community. It doesn't have to be racism, it could be any form of discrimination, kind of how that works. And if anyone in the chat would like to chime in with how you witness discrimination manifesting within our community, feel free to chime in as well. So I will let Joe Mama, if you'd like to take this away, I'll let you go first.
Where to start? No,
Right.
there are a lot of instances of encountering discrimination. There's discrimination from show producers, from management. I remember when I first started, I was encouraged to paint myself darker by some, and by others to paint myself lighter, which was really a betrayal of myself. There's discrimination. There's some prejudice that comes from judging someone as they walk up to the door, you know, and I see that quite often where, I don't know, there's dress code enforcement. There's a way to set up a dress code to make it discriminatory, and it's oftentimes blatantly racist. And I've worked with owners to try and switch that around. One specifically with Progress, that was quite a few years ago, and it's been such a stain on them that they've worked overtime to course correct. So some of the things that they've done, they've changed their entire programming. They've changed their staffing. They've changed the way that they promote, and they've stuck to the original kind of tenements that we all agreed to in the second roundtable with all the GMs. And I think that's not that that's the most we can ask of them. They've worked really hard to stay on that path towards restoration, you know. But other than that, I don't like when I see people prejudicially judged for the way that they dress when they walk up to enter a place. It's all about, you know, there's the vibe part, which I understand, but the same, if you see somebody in Timberlands, or if their pants are slightly sagging, and then you judge them straight out the gate before they even open their mouth, I feel that that's just blatantly wrong. I think it's something that we still have to overcome. And I think there's a lot of anti-racist work that a lot of people need to continue on and stick to, that I see. Overall, I've seen a lot of improvement, so it's hard for me to still find a lot of the errors of our ways that continue to perpetuate, but they're there and we see them. And I think the best way to combat it is to call it out when you see it. I mean, that's the most I think we can ask of an individual.
Yeah, definitely. Milani or Abhijeet, if you'd like to chime in, what are some of the other ways you see discrimination manifesting within the LGBTQ community?
I think like trans people, specifically trans women, are like uniquely like affected in a lot of like nightlife and other like queer spaces. I think like in nightlife especially, like trans misogyny is such like an insidious and like deep rooted thing that trans women face in a way that like you know, as much as we can talk about it and address it, like there have to be like actual like actions that take place to prevent it, because it's something that comes from queer people. It's something that can come from straight people in a space. It just like is so like engulfing to and it can tear down someone in such like a harsh way that like I think that that's something that needs to be taken like very seriously in a lot of like nightlife spaces where like consent is, as much as like, you know, it is a thing that we talk about in a crowded space, in a dark space, things happen that are not able to like be addressed in a meaningful way unless like we are able to like change things from like all directions.
Definitely. Do you have anything you'd like to add, Milani?
Yes, like Jamala said, there has been a lot of improvement. Like, I am very glad that there has been a lot of improvement, and it's because of people like Jamala, people like Abhijeet, people like myself that have worked closely with management. And I'll use an example. During the years working with Hydrate, I worked very closely with them to make sure that we were, because they knew I was an activist, that I am an activist. They know I'm an activist, so they would come to me for advice, which I appreciated so much. For example, one of the things that we changed when the whole bathroom situation, you know, going all around the news about, you know, men, women, you know, I was asked, you know, like, how can we change this? You know, like specifically, what sign can we purchase? So it started off with Hydrate, and then it rippled into all the LKH locations. So all the LKH locations changed their bathroom signs where they're inclusive, regardless of your gender. So that's something, you know, that's an example of an improvement that we have to work closely with management of these establishments to make sure that the change is created. I will say something that has been bothering me for years that I've spoken about is that I feel like some performers are discriminated from performing at like Pride Fest, Market Days, Pride of the Park. And I'll use an example. I have girls from La Cueva. La Cueva is a long-lasting Latinx bar in Little Village that I would love to see performers from that bar perform at these locations, at these events. You know, like I'm tired of seeing the same queens over and over, you know, and especially now that all these brunches are being created, all these pride events, like, you know, like all these, like, you know, drag is taking over everywhere, not just, you know, the Boys Town location, but like there's, you know, the Vic Theater is having events, you know, the Fairmont Theater is having events. Like all these events are not including us, you know, a certain performers, a certain population of performers, or even from the Jeffrey Pub. I would love to see some of those performers there. You know, we have to make sure that we not just stay in the circle of the Boys Town area of the same queens that we always see every year, but we have to expand. Like these promoters, these GMs need to explore more and understand that there's more bars all around Chicago, not just in Boys Town. There's performers all around that we've never seen perform in Boys Town because they're not given the opportunity. So that's another thing that needs to be worked on. And I feel it is some type of discrimination because, come on, like, these girls do come and support the shows. So how come they're not in these shows?
Yeah, you bring up a really good point. We need to be focusing on geographical diversity and not just the other forms of diversity as well. A lot of LGBTQ nightlife is centered in Boys Town, but it exists elsewhere in Chicago. Do any other panelists have anything they'd like to add to that note, or any other spaces outside of Boys Town that you'd like to shout out?
Yeah, I think like to add to kind of what Milani said, like it is like I think specifically for like Spanish speaking drag queens that perform at La Cueva and stuff, like fantasy in Boys Town is like the only space where like, you know, that does engage with them. And I think it is like a very important thing to bring up, that like are we as producers, are we as people doing enough to bring in folks that might not have that in connection, whether it be because of a language barrier or geographical barrier, are they're not able to get into these spaces. And you know, it's like, like we need to find ways, like, because I think what Milani said is extremely not just valid, but like very pressing to like the time in which we're like reformatting how nightlife is accessible to people, is doing this physical outreach to folks that haven't been included so far.
Definitely. Joe Mama, do you have anything you'd like to add, or do you want me to go to the next question?
Yeah, I mean, I've always been curious, and we've worked, especially with the Black Drag Council, and finding a way to connect a bridge from the north to the south side, like a Jeffrey Pub, and also to the west, you've got Beauty Bar happening. You've got what's the other one? There's like the Falcon Inn did something. There's a whole world to explore, and I just would encourage everyone to go check out Hyde Park, go check out the South Side. Bring a friend with you because you're exploring a new space, of course, and kind of see there's talent everywhere. I was on set and discovered a whole plethora of drag queens I never knew existed on the South Side. That was for Empire, and it's just like, you got to get out there, explore it. There's a lot of talent and a lot of great entertainment to find.
Definitely. And we've got about 15 minutes left, so soon I'm going to open it up to questions from the chat. So if anyone has questions of Joe Mama, Abhijeet, or Milani, please drop them in the chat. And I'll make sure that we address those. But in the meantime, we've touched on this a little bit, but I want to talk about our trans and non-binary community members who face added layers of discrimination. I believe all of you are a part of that community, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on what people can do to make their spaces more inclusive of trans and non-binary people. Anyone can take it away.
I think just to like get the conversation going, I think it's like very easy to like say that you are making a space accessible to trans and non-binary people. It's very easy on a surface level to be accessible to trans and non-binary people, but it's about like more than just something at the surface level. It's about trying to find ways that we can like actively like combat the harassment and the discrimination that they face. Like, you know, like at the end of the day, like changing the name Boys Town to North Halstead, sure, that was a lovely cosmetic change, but what has that actually done for women, for trans people, for non-binary people that frequent that space? How has it made it any more accessible than a space like La Cueva or like Jeffrey Pub that are not in neighborhoods that have changed their names or made an outward appearance of being more inclusive, but have always been spaces for trans women and trans performers to like exist and thrive in? So it's, you know, like we can put a lovely little rainbow bandage on everything we want to, but what about like actually fixing the things?
Definitely. Milani, do you have anything you'd like to add?
I kind of lost my train of thought.
That's all right. You had talked about earlier, I think, bathrooms. Maybe if you want to expand about how people can improve their bathrooms, you know, so that they're more inclusive of trans and non-binary people.
Oh, yes, we're talking about that. So not only bathrooms, but even like, I mean, I do see an improvement, but one thing that I've noticed in the past is that some bars would only hire like the beauty queens, the trans, well, not the trans women, well, yes, trans women and drag queens that present as female and look more like, you know, a pageant queen. You know, that definitely has changed in some bars, but I feel that it need, you know, like, I mean, I have seen an improvement. I appreciate that because I've seen more diverse cast of performers that I would have never seen at these bars perform there, which, you know, amazes me. But another way that we can be more inclusive to our trans and gender nonconforming and non-binary people is just, you know, like if they come into a place and you're talking to them or you're talking about them, like, as simple as asking the gender pronouns. You know, different people go by different gender pronouns, and you can't just assume the gender pronouns. You know, if you don't know how they're presenting, just ask them. You know, it's as easy as just asking them. Um, and just because you see them one day as presenting as one, then the next day as another, still ask them as how they present.
That's a really good point. It looks like we lost Joe Mama temporarily. So while they get their computer cord working again, we will go on to the next question. What is your vision of a truly inclusive space? So what does that look like to you? If you walk into a bar or a nightclub, what's your vision for like queer utopia? We'll start with Abhijeet.
I think a space of queer utopia would not be a nightclub to me. I think queer utopia would be just a space that is like so transformative and so expansive that it cannot be defined as anything other than just a space that we can thrive in, that we can exist in, that we can just experience joy in and leave any other baggage outside. Like that to me is queer utopia, because I think there's like something great about queerness being exclusive, something great about queerness just being something that is only understood by our community, and being able to enter a space where you can leave everything else behind. That's queer utopia.
And Milani, how about you? What's your vision for a truly inclusive space?
Okay, I like this question because I would love to see more trans and non-binary people in staff, especially bartending. Like, I feel they're not given the opportunities. You know, North Halsted is dominated by gay cisgender men behind the bar and staff and management. I would love to see a change in that. You know, some people say, oh, well, they're not applying. It's because you're not giving them the opportunity. You don't give them that welcomeness. I'm like, yes, you can apply. You know, I would love to see trans women behind the bar, you know, bartending. I would love to see more trans women working as security, you know, working, you know, in management. You know, it's a change that needs to happen. Like, it still feels like it's a boys' town, not North Halsted. So I feel that as far as staffing in a place, my utopia would be where it's diverse and not just in performers, but also in staff.
Definitely. And we lost Joe Mama. I hope they come back. But while we wait, I'm going to move on to our last question. Oh, looks like they're back. Hi, Joe. Do we have you?
Yes, I believe
okay,
so.
Cool. You are just in time. I guess if you want to chime in, if you want to talk at all about making spaces more inclusive for trans or non-binary people, or if you want to talk about your vision for a truly inclusive space, I'd love to hear your thoughts on one or both of those.
I think I can wind them both together a little bit, especially for me. One thing about trans inclusive spaces is not only to walk the walk, as we've all said, but definitely talk the talk. And it's not up to just us as trans people to line those bullet points out. I think it's up to those who are trying to, are responsible to make those spaces more inclusive, to investigate, to question themselves, to question the actions they've done, and use that to course correct and plot out the right path forward. And ask themselves to try and put themselves in the shoes. I know it's not fully possible, but to just try and imagine, how would I feel? Because me as a performer, as a trans performer, I've gotten crotch grabbed so many more times than you'd think. I get hit on by a Uber driver every time I get in the car, and that's not to flutter my own feathers. It actually makes you feel quite unsafe, and it's a very dangerous position to be in. And I can only imagine how other trans people and how women must feel. So when I do that, I think about solutions and how to fix those problems. And so the first thing is to ask yourself, what have I done? How can I change that? And chart a course to move further into the future more properly, so that everything's more welcome. And as far as my dream for a space, it would be where those problems have been solved, where they've been properly course corrected and changed without anyone having to do the work for them. Oftentimes we find that that burden ends on our backs rather than the ones in power. And I think that that's one adjustment that definitely can be done. It's like, check yourself before you wreck yourself in a big way. And if I can walk into a space without having to find myself in a compromising position and through no fault of my own, then that would be the dream. I'd like to be able to not have myself fondled. I'd like to not have myself misgendered. I'd like to, as I said in the beginning, to be, welcomed, appreciated, and validated, and a little bit of those things. And I know that I feel space, and I'd feel welcome, and I wouldn't feel attacked. And I think I'd spend more money that way. But a dream space would be without currency, because I'm not really a capitalist myself, even though I like things. And I think that if there was a way to have, I like to tell to certain ownership and people, I say Sesame Street. Sesame Street is something that visually we can all connect with. No one was accosted or really misgendered on Sesame Street. And they all knew that they were all living together and working together in an environment with a common goal of where safety was just, implied. It didn't need to be pronounced. And everyone took everyone into account, and everyone knew that everyone was valid. And so if we can all kind of think of to that nostalgic, almost idyllic space, that's closer to my idea of a queer dream.
I got you. So we're going to rebrand North Halsted Street as Sesame Street and go from there. Cool. Well, let me double check. We don't have any questions from the chat, so we are going to start wrapping up, but I want to give it back to all of you. We'll start with Abhijeet again. Do you have any final thoughts, and where can people find you?
I think for everyone listening, first of all, thank you so much for supporting this. Diversity, inclusion does not start and end with us. It's all of us doing our part and, growing from our mistakes. So please, be open for growth, be open for feedback, and watch your community flourish with you. And in terms of where you can catch me, Pride, like I said, doing way too much, occupying way too much space. So this Saturday, I'm going to be at this lovely event curated by iEaters, which is a food, drink, and event company with Paul Octavius. They're doing a queer prom, and I'm going to be performing there. And later in the week, I am one of the producers of Chicago's A Drag Festival that is happening, which is featuring 4D drag performers from across Chicago. If anyone is not able to access these events because of financial barriers, please just DM me, contact me, and I will find a way to get you front stage.
Thank you. And then Milani?
You can catch me next Sunday, the 26th, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, for the Nationals for Miss Diosa Latina USA. I will be competing next Sunday, which is also the day of the Pride Parade. But you can go in the parade during the day and then come to the pageant in the evening. It's only a 2-hour drive. It's in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Also, I did want to promote in this fall coming, in a couple months, I forgot what month because it's still in the works. Orgullo y Pride, we're doing basically a Latinx Pride event. Like I said, we have to create our own events because some people don't include us. So Orgullo y Pride is happening this fall, I believe in September or November. And I think September, because it's supposed to be an outdoor event. So just, check out the Calor page. But Calor is one of the organizers of this event. You can check me out at Calor. After the pageant, I'll be there back at work doing HIV testing. We're there Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. And I'll be there also testing. And if you need any linkage to care, you can also reach me on social media through Instagram or Facebook.
Cool. And then Joe Mama, you too. Any last thoughts on where can people find you? And then if you could all stick around, I got one question from the chat, so I'm going to ask that.
Thank you. You can find me, at Berlin Nightclub for the rest of this month. You can find me throughout Pride, always at Berlin Nightclub. You can find me this Sunday at Foster Beach at 12:30 p.m. We're doing the closing ceremony for the AIDS Right for Life, sponsoring T-Pan. We've got, what else is going on? You can find me at Fat Poor next Saturday for an amazing brunch show. So check you out there in Wicker Park on our west side. And I guess you can always find me around. I like to float around and visit and just look for the one with the big hair asking for the bathroom. And that's me.
Thank you. And now time for our bonus question. This comes from Greg. Can you name some LGBTQ inclusive spaces that you know of that are not bars? And do you see the value in today's Chicago for affinity spaces like gender non-binary only events, etc.? I'll let anyone take it away.
Yeah, I think Eli T is a great space to consider that is not a bar. It is a sober space that is a tea and coffee and bubble tea shop in Andersonville. It's owned by a queer person of color. They have like a lot of activities that don't center around like alcohol consumption, which I think are very, very important. And they very much highly support them, so definitely do check them out.
Cool. Any that you'd like to shout out, Joe or Milani?
The other spaces, I mean, I'm trying to form through Geek House quite a few barbecues and outdoor events that involve cosplay that are inclusive and accessible, and also still out in the fresh air, given COVID is still alive and well, that you can find. And just check the Geek House event pages on Facebook and our Twitter for any upcoming events that are inclusive and open. Outside of that, I mean, I guess this brings to call to attention that we need more spaces. We need way more spaces outside of the bars and venues that can be more easily accessible to all.
Yeah. Milani, do you know of any sober spaces you'd like to shout out? It's okay if you don't.
Well, I can't think of any of the top of my head, but the only thing I can think of at the top of my head is certain healthcare locations. Like you can go to Out of the Closet. We have our AIDS Healthcare Foundation pharmacy there. You have Howard Brown. And when I mean it, that they're inclusive is like, you know, they ask you for your gender pronouns in the paperwork, and they don't have to go by your legal name. They can go by the name that you prefer. So when they call you out, they don't say your legal name, they say your preferred name. Calor, basically healthcare, like LGBTQ healthcare places that we know of. Those are other places that, you know, they have programming, you know, that helps the community, not just with HIV testing, but they have so many other resources, like therapy, you know, mental health care, and other things that, you know, are not just focused on clubs and bars.
Yeah, that's really important. And I have one I'd like to add too. It's actually down the street from me. It's called Han Training. It's a transgender and Asian-owned gym in the North Halstead, Boys Town area. They put on a lot of community events. They just did Pull for Pride, which was an inclusive deadlifting competition for LGBTQ people, especially trans people who are often excluded from deadlifting competitions, which is not fair. So Han Training is great. They do a lot of events. Check them out, and that's all. So I really want to thank the three of you for your time and for joining us here today. Also, thank you for getting up in drag for this. You all look amazing. Really appreciate it. It was such a thoughtful discussion, and I just really appreciate your time. And thank you to everyone in the chat who showed up for this. Thank you for your thoughtful question, Greg. Thanks for everyone who chimed in. It was a fun evening, and I hope you all got something out of it.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Of course. All right. Have a